now I will hand over right away the Martin Lowson Award. Just a few words before it. The Martin Lowson Award is meant for work, students work at university or research institutes or whatever on ATN systems. It should encourage students, PhD students, master students, whatever students, bachelor students, to work on this subject. And we want more people to work on this interesting subject, because at the moment the situation is not very good. Only very few institutes are really working on it. May I ask you, how many of you work really at a public research institute or private research institute on PRT? Okay, and probably most of the researcher around the world is present here. So and so you see the situation. So if you have any connection to university, say that next year there will be another Martin Lowson Award, and we would like to see many contributions. So start working, use all the simulators that we have just seen. They're open source. Download them, make students, involve students, make them to work and to submit papers, and do simulation case studies, visibility studies. We're flexible. It doesn't need to be a technological development. Just apply it, make evaluations. I mean, there are many. I can help you with some ideas. I have many ideas. So please participate in the next Martin Lowson Award. It's worthwhile. It's $500 plus the travel expenses to next Podcars conference.
And the glory.
And the glory to receive the Martin Lowson Award and to receive it from myself. So all right. So I will invite you. So please, one for the photo.
You're allowed to smile, you know.
Relax. Now you can relax.
Also one over here. Smart.
Okay. I should say a few words. He is at the moment a PhD student, so that's a part of his PhD work. He would continue to work on this topic for another, how many years? No, this one. A few years. A few years. Yeah. A few years. That's fine.
It started the eco-mobility project when the project started. I think 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. So he's in his final years. He's continuing to work on this topic, and I hopefully will see optimized empty vehicle management next year.
Yeah.
Okay. And
You're not his professor. I love this, Jörg.
I'm not his professor. Okay. So with this, I conclude this session. I wish to see many more papers to be submitted to me or to ATRA for the next year's award. There are many new real PRT applications. So look around, see what you get: information, data, open data, simulators. There's a lot to do, and get engaged in this in this research. We really need a broader research at the university about these topics to spread also that there's also not only self-driving cars but also ATNs, automated transit. Okay, so finally I invite the final speaker, the concluding notes. So who is it? Walter Kulyk, please.
Thank you, George. Well, we're out of time, so this kind of forces me to really, get my remarks very, very short and sweet. First of all, I want to thank the organizers of this conference for really allowing me to offer my final thoughts and, of course, kind of the final words on what I view as a very successful conference over the last 2 days. I also want to thank the organizers of this event, including Ingrid, certainly, Magnus left a little early, Krister, Ron, Ingmar, and I apologize if I've missed anyone else. I think you've done an outstanding job of really putting on some not only wonderful speakers, but I think the comprehensiveness of the topics, and the broadness of the topics, including the whole array of issues dealing with new podcars, the theory, the technology, etc. I think was just outstanding. Just a very quick observation on the objective, which I think the organizers met. I think the objective of this conference was really a good overview of existing applications, planned applications, studies, theories, ultimately in order to educate the industry and also to market opportunities available. I think the last area I think is very much needed these days. I think we need to continue to market the opportunities that podcars and automated vehicles can provide us. So I think this conference did that. I think the next conference we ought to be focusing on that issue. I noticed that in addition to some of my long-term colleagues here, I very few other people I really knew or recognized, but I think that's good because I think as an industry we need to kind of broaden our horizons and to educate the public and educate the the practitioners, the politicians, the planners, etc. I got a couple of key points that I thought were important that were raised during the event that I didn't see in previous conferences, or at least not to the comprehensive extent that I think was covered in this event. One was the word of intermodal transportation. I think we all now, I think, better understand that podcars and automated transit systems really have a role to play in the entire intermodal system. It's all part of the system. It's not just podcar systems going from point A to point B, but rather, it's the entire equation, so to speak. I think autonomous technology and vehicles, as we all know, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, is really taking off and accelerating quite fast. I was impressed with the technology involving the deep learning that I think can surpass some of the modeling and other types of technological solutions that we're looking at. That's really exciting. That's going to raise some other issues. How do you really address the safety and standards dealing with that. Certainly payment systems, are maturing. They're now considered a service not only just for transit but for all forms of transportation, and that's really quite encouraging. Some of that is happening in the States. I think most of it is happening in Europe. Other words, accessibility. We need to address our systems and design for accessibility in mind. Scalability, we've heard that term a number of times. I think that's important, particularly for podcar development, because maybe the money and the political will is not there initially for an entire, what I would use the term ATN, the automated transit network. But maybe if we can do it, one system or one subsystem at a time, I think maybe we'll get there. Other thoughts that I had that kind of stuck out. I thought Ingmar did wonderful presentation on the synergies between driverless cars and ATN systems, and also going the other way. We can learn from driverless cars, from that technology, and what we've already accomplished in ATN and Podcars, and vice versa. And that lends itself, I think, to the issue of dual mode. I think that's a very practical solution in certain locations and locales. I think Peter talked a little bit about some of his thoughts on Podcars. Not only in the States, we've got one system that may be coming up very quickly. He mentioned the Greenville Airport, and there was some studies going on in Park City. But he also stressed that education is critical and important. We as an industry, not only APTA, but others of you that are involved in other organizations, really need to talk to your colleagues and address the issue of education, and let the policymakers and others know what we're attempting to do, and what the benefits of Podcars and automated systems are involved with. He also mentioned, and I congratulate ATRA for putting forward to the U.S. Transit Administration some good ideas, and in terms of their new strategic planning, they asked the industry to come up with what they thought were some of the top research needs and issues. And ATRA was selected in terms of 3 of their problems. They were the top 3. And the number one, and I've been saying this for many years, the number one research need, I think, is a good, solid demonstration somewhere in the world. And we're not talking a $20 or $30 million project. Ultimately, I think we ought to go for the brass rail and go for a $300 or $400 million project. That's difficult, but I think in the environment that we're in today, politically, particularly in Washington, with the focus on connected vehicles and automated systems and the like, and the new reauthorization program or period coming up in another 2 or 3 years, I think we have a shot at something like that. So I would challenge the industry, those of you that are sitting in the audience today, to kind of work with ATRA and others to maybe really start a lobbying campaign for with the politicians to try to get a real live citywide demonstration underway. I think only with that, particularly in the U.S., are we really going to take the next step in ATN and automated transit. I was impressed with a young man from the Flemish government, in what the Flemish government is trying to do with regard to livability and mobility, and he used the term mobility as a service. That's important, and I think that's very fundamental to what we're trying to accomplish. Smart cities, they're trying to do the same thing in this country. We've already formulated a project in Columbus, Ohio that puts $40 million for a Smart Cities Challenge. I think we as an industry need to follow that, and I think we can influence some of the ideas that Columbus, Ohio is trying to do with regard to smart cities. I've heard climate change, environment, energy use, the term smart cities, livability, mobility, happiness. The first time I've heard of that term, mobility, happiness, sustainability, and sustainable mobility. We also, I think, heard not only the importance or the effectiveness of Podcars on elevated systems, but also I think the future effectiveness of Podcars on existing infrastructure, whether they're roads or automated or developed guideways that are already in use. In fact, I think there's some talk about Ollie being put on the people mover system in Jacksonville, Florida, for example. So that's an idea that I think can kind of take off on Podcar use on an existing infrastructure. In this case, it's already an existing elevated system. And finally, there was talk of the auto industry on the verge of disruption, and that clearly is going on right now. I would say that the transit industry is also on the verge of major disruption, and we're part of that phenomenon. I think we should take advantage of that opportunity to really put forward many of the ideas that we heard in our discussion today as a challenge. I think the U.S. political machine is now focused largely on the technical side, on automation, on autonomous driving systems. A lot more money has been put onto the stage than has been in many years. And again, this gives us a wonderful opportunity as a transit industry to kind of be part of the rising tide, I call it, in automation. And again, I challenge all of us in the next 2 to 3 years, let's see if we can work together to influence our policymakers in the U.S. and certainly those of you here that are in other countries and your policymakers to take advantage of this new phenomenon of disruption as well as focused attention on automation. And again, I think Podcars and automated systems together, because we're all part of the same, kind of industry, we can take advantage of that rising tide. And then one final thought, and I won't belabor it, there was mention of a White House announcement, and if you go on the USDOT website, you'll find a copy of a new policy that the U.S. Secretary of Transportation has put out, and it's focused on encouraging the safe and responsible deployment of automated vehicles. And there's really 2 or 3 key things in there. I won't get into the details, but number one, it lays out the need for vehicle performance guidelines for manufacturers and developers. And through that, what it says is that there should be a 15-point safety assessment done for every design and deployment of an automated system in this country. And in fact, the manufacturers have to certify that those systems are safe according to that assessment. It also lays out current regulatory tools for testing, and also ultimately they're looking at potential for, not only the potential, but ultimately for development of standards in this whole area. So I think we can be part of that industry, even though it's focused now on cars, but I think we can shoehorn ourselves in because they will have to address not only automobiles, but buses, pod cars, and other types of vehicles as we move forward. So with that, again, I want to congratulate the organizers of this event. Wonderful. This has been well worth my time, and I took about 15 pages of notes, and I always star those things that I consider important. And I probably have about 20 stars on my notes. So again, thank you all. Congratulations.